From the King George's Estates in downtown Port St. Lucie, Florida. Good Thursday evening, everybody, and welcome back to KC and 60 right here on DARPATV.com. Kevin Canessa here with you for the next hour or so. And to all of our regulars, I welcome you back to the program. And to anybody who may be here for the first time, I welcome you to the program for the first time as well. It's about 4 minutes past the hour, and I wish I didn't have to start this show off on a personal note, but I absolutely do today because somebody very important to me died last night. And this is her picture that I just put up on the screen, and her name is Janet Uzzolina. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just tell you a little bit of a story about how I got to know Janet over the years and what happened, because I truthfully don't know what happened to her, but apparently she was sick and not doing too well for the last couple of months. But back in 2005, I was happily working in Catholic school as a teacher and a campus minister, and I was also working in a parish as a youth minister. And at that point, the whole scandal with the Catholic Church and priests was pretty prevalent at the time, and I got to the point where I knew that I had to make a change, that I wanted to make a change, and that's precisely what I did, and was fortunate in the latter part of that year, in August, to be hired back by two weekly newspapers in Bloomfield and in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, the Independent Press of Bloomfield and the Glen Ridge paper in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. And my very first day was we had an office in Bloomfield. There was also an office in Union, but the office where I'd be working out of was a satellite office in Bloomfield. And Janet was the very first person I saw the moment I walked into the place. And it's a good thing I didn't go by first impressions, because when I walked into the place, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because she was rude, very cold, and really wanted absolutely nothing to do with me when I walked into the place. And it was kind of funny because somehow, even though it was a very inauspicious beginning, I had a very strong feeling that at one point or another I would become very, very friendly with Janet. And that's precisely what happened over the year that I worked there. She became, to me, almost a second mother. No, not almost a second mother. She became a second mother. And she was born on April 4th, 1953. And she was born exactly 1 month and 1 day after my own mother, who was born March 3rd, 1953. So she was basically the same age as my own mother. And she had so many similar traits to my own mother that I was so fortunate to have met her at this point in time, where I was living far, even though I was in New Jersey, I was living in Summit at the time. I was still far away from my own mother, didn't get to see her as much as I had hoped to and as much as I had wanted to. And we had a lot of arguments over the years. She was a very opinionated, boisterous human being who had something to say about every single thing that we did as journalists and editors, which was great in a sense, but it also was a pain sometimes. And when I ultimately wound up leaving there, I went to work at another newspaper which actually covered Janet's hometown of Belleville, New Jersey. And we kept in touch over the years. And if any of you know anything about New Jersey, at least in the past, it was certainly known for its Stewart's root beer. There were a lot of stands all over the place. And we would go 3 or 4 times a year when it was open to Stewart's and Kearney and get hot dogs and French fries and, of course, an ice-cold frosty mug of root beer whenever we had a chance. And we kept in touch over the years. She was a huge Redskins fan. And being a Giants fan, that certainly opened up for many, many interesting discussions, to say the least. So fast forward to July of 2013, I went back to New Jersey, and I had my vacation cut short. But one of the stops I was supposed to have was to see Janet, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. And then this morning, I woke up early. About 6 o'clock for me is very, very early. And as I do almost every morning, my first stop is at nj.com for the obituaries. And as I scrolled all the way down and saw the U, I was just stunned, because at 60 years old, I just never expect anybody who's 60 years old to be in the obituaries. But if you are a regular obituary reader, as I am, you know that 60 is just far too common in the obituary section. And there are people so much younger even than the age of 60 who are appearing in the obituary section on a daily basis. So I'm not quite sure what it was that really struck Janet, but as I look at that picture, I'm not sure if you can tell, she was in a wheelchair there, so I would imagine she was probably having trouble with her legs, which she did for a long time. And it's just, to me, it was a very, very sad thing to have to wake up to this morning. She was a wonderful woman. She was a caring woman, and everything that she did and she said was in service to other people. And the truth of the matter is, I'm going to miss her, and I just feel so terribly that I didn't get a chance to see her before she left this earth. But I appreciate you indulging me for a few moments here on KC and 60 as I just reminisce about my dear friend who will be buried on Saturday afternoon in North Arlington, New Jersey. And she was a gem, and unfortunately gone entirely too young. Janet Uzzolina was her name, and she was 60 years old. And, Billy Scarterfield, who is here tonight, and I have always had conversations about mortality and just how quick human life passes by. It just, I don't want to sound like a priest today, but I almost can't help but feeling that way, because it is just ridiculous sometimes how good people lose their lives at such young ages. It just, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I don't get it. I never will, and it's just it's very, very frustrating and sad. Thank you, Timmy. And here's a guy, Timmy Gillette, who knows all too well about mortality. Lost his dad at such a young age. He was such a young guy when he died. Timmy was young when he lost him, and he just lost his uncle recently too. So we all do. Billy's father was 60. Timmy's father was 55. These people are too young. They're just way too young to be exiting the earth, and it just leaves an indelible mark on people. It really, really does. And the thing that I often wonder, when I was involved with the church and involved in ministry, I would have to speak sometimes at wakes or funerals, and I did it for my own uncle. It's always so hard, because so many times, especially for those of us who grew up Catholic, when you hear the priest or whoever it is that's speaking who says, this is a day to be happy, not a day to be sad, because we can rejoice in happiness that our dearly departed loved one is in the presence of Jesus Christ and God in heaven. And while that is in some ways comforting, it's also very, very difficult in hindsight for the survivors. How do you look a person in the eye who loses a child at a young age and say that your child is in a great place right now, in a better place? Well, yeah, but no. No. I just found out the other day that a college classmate of mine was 6 months pregnant, and the baby was stillborn. Now, what do you say to the mother of a 6-month pregnancy who loses their child at 6 months? There's the development is there. What do you say? How can any of that make sense at all? How could it make sense that, unfortunately, Timmy's godfather and uncle died, and his sister dies the next day? Where on earth do you rationalize that? And what could any human being say that would make that feel any the better? It's a very difficult balance. It really, really is, and it's very hard when you're the person that has to be the one to be strong about it. When my Uncle Matty died back in 2005, most of you know this already, but I've had 2 uncles who have died from HIV/AIDS. And when my Uncle Pat died in 1995, he suffered a lot, to the point where he couldn't even breathe at nighttime, and it was painful to hear him suffering. But my Uncle Matty in 2005, 10 years later, died after getting sick one day. 2 days later, he croaked. And the one thing we kept saying over and over was, thank you, God, he didn't suffer. And he didn't. But do you think that made a big difference to my grandmother, who buried her third son of 7 children? I often wonder that, too. Again, I don't want this to sound like a sermon or a homily, but I think about my grandmother. Lost 3 children of her 7. She's still alive. She's still alive. She's going to be 93 this year. But my Uncle Thomas died in 1970, Pat died in 95, and Maddie died in 05. You know, no parent should ever have to bury 1 child, let alone 2, let alone 3, and 2 within 10 years from the same stupid disease, you know? It's absolutely remarkable. But she somehow has gotten through it. She has somehow gotten through it. And it is just, to me, I don't know where you get the strength. I don't know where you get the power when you're a mother and you lose 3 of your own children when you had 7. I don't follow it. She says it was her faith. That's my grandmother, and I don't know how. Because I've often, I mean, personally, sometimes say, you know, the common question, why would a good and gracious God ever take away 3 children from one mother? And she's certainly not alone. And why would a good and gracious God ever take away 2 children from HIV/AIDS? But it happens. It happens. Wawa, who just arrived in the chat room, says that her great-grandparents lost 4 sets of twin boys. I can't even begin to think about that. Her twins were the first one who survived at birth. Good God. I'm afraid to ask this question, Wawa, because I don't know the answer and I don't want to put you on the spot, but were you a twin too? Or did it skip a generation? I wonder. Goodness gracious. Bill says, my mom was one of 5 kids, and 2 others died before they were 1. Holy Jesus. You see? You see how difficult all the, you know, I guess you never know sometimes, too, with the way what people go through. What people go through. Here we are. You know, Mawa and I are notorious for going back and forth with one another on politics, and yet when you stop for 2 seconds and realize what somebody's been through, it certainly does. Timmy just took the words right out of my mouth. It makes you so much stronger. It really does. I still can't, for the life of me, ever begin to imagine what Timmy and Mike Gillette went through, and Nicole. What was that? 13 years ago already, for God's sake? Was it right? All right, Timmy, I mean, it's been a while.